What are his powers? What can he do? What can he not do? You recall that when he came on board, when he was appointed by President Bola Tinubu, there was outrage about especially the suspension that brought him in of Sim Fubara and the deputy Ngozi Odu, all the House of Assembly members in Rivers State, their suspension for initial 6 months. But that's not the conversation. He is on board. And the initial or the maiden speech he made it clear, I'm one of you, and I'm here for stability, essentially to stabilize the polity and, to see to the well-being of the people, let everything be calm. We will work together. We'll do what is necessary for these states to be stabilized. After all, I'm one of you here, talking about his affinity with Rivers State, especially Port Harcourt. But then after that, there has been a series of actions in which has gotten many persons, got so many persons talking about the suspension or, sacking, so to speak, of some appointees, all appointees, that were there before he came on board. And now the appointment of local government administrators, he made that decision, and many persons are saying, excuse us, 2 or 3 points there. Does he have that power under the law to make such a decision? Number 2, to what end is he making this decision? Number 3, he has an initial 6 months, so to speak, maybe renewable, maybe not. This decision of ease, is it not having like a far-reaching move? You are only to be there for 6 months. You are making decisions like you want to be there for years. Does he have the ears and the permission of the president to do that? Some are saying, does he have a blanket power? So we look into all of that because it's about the Nigerian people. And that is why we're having that conversation today. We have somebody who knows about law. He teaches law. He has practiced law. And he's also a public affairs analyst. Dr. Misbah Lateef, he joins us virtually. Good morning, sir. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good morning, and thank you for having me. I'm also pleased to be here. Good morning to your viewers as well.
Thank you very much. Let's get on to business. I'm sure you have followed the development in Rivers State, the appointment of retired Admiral Ibas, how he got into power, and his promise of stability, which is very germane, and what he has been doing. The latest is the administrator, local government administrator that has appointed 23 of them. What is your impression? In fact, let me start from there. Your impression of the administration of Rear Admiral Ibas so far, before we get into the nitty-gritty.
All right, thank you. My first impression is to say that the sole administrator, who has been appointed to attend to an extraordinary circumstance or situation in Rivers State, pursuant to the declaration of emergency by the president, according to the provision of the Constitution of Nigeria, has been doing his work. And the nature of the work is such that he will, in the language of the Constitution, be doing extraordinary things. Because unfortunately, and this is a reality that people have failed to come to terms with, unfortunately, we have what you can correctly describe as extra-constitutional and extra-legal situation in Rivers State. So for me, I think the SO, I call him SO really, the sole administrator has just been working to terms. I mean, doing extraordinary things. However, I would say unfortunate or maybe strange, they may appear, or even difficult for people to accept. He has been doing extraordinary things, and the Constitution anticipates that he will do extraordinary and extra, I would say, legal things. You can check Section 305, sub 3C, where the Constitution says the president can appoint and then to attend to or to the extent of addressing extraordinary power and all of those things. So yes, he has been doing extras. He has been doing more than we expected. he has been doing more than we were used to. And that is basically why I think there is so much controversies. So yes, he has been working extraordinarily.
All right, Dr. Lateef. Here's my question concerning the sole administrator of Rivers State. Let's take a little background to why I'm asking this question. On Tuesday, 8th of March, 2025, Justice Adam Mohammed of the Federal High Court in Port Harcourt gave a ruling restraining the sole administrator from making such appointments, from appointing local government administrators in Rivers State. Less than 24 hours, yesterday, Wednesday, 9th of March, 2025, Vice Admiral Ibok-Ete Ibas retired, appointed 23 local government administrators in Rivers State. My question is this, Dr. Lateef, as a legal practitioner, what is the legal significance of that court ruling restraining the sole administrator from going ahead with such appointments?
All right, thank you. And permit me to say this before I answer that, question, a very good question, I will say. Before I attend to what the judge did or did not do. Let me say first and foremost that notwithstanding what I've said earlier regarding the extraordinary powers of the sole administrator, a sole administrator or whoever it is still bound by the provisions of the Constitution of Nigeria and particularly decisions of the court. You will recall that the proclamation document or statement, if you like, which made the emergency, did not actually affect the judiciary. So, in summary, the sole administrator is also bound by court decisions and judgments because this is only an emergency affecting the executive powers and legislative powers of the state. Now, having said that, the question then is there or was there any so-called judgment of the Federal High Court in Rivers State? The answer is no. I have since found out that the so-called claim of a judgment or ruling is actually not correct. Just to be mild, I could have said it's fake news. Now, I've personally checked, with colleagues in Rivers State, and I've also seen publication online which clearly states that what the Federal High Court did, basically, in that ruling, was to advise the parties who approached the court to go and put the respondent on notice, that is, the sole administrator. I've seen the ruling. I've read it. I've seen the enroll order. Okay? It didn't order the sole administrator not to appoint, not to do anything. Those people approached the court with what we call a motion ex parte, that is, an application that can be had before a court without the knowledge of the other party. And the court, in its own wisdom, says that, well, I think it will be reasonable to put the other party in notice. I hereby order that you should put them on notice. And, one of the logical things you may also want to add to this is this. We know the controversies about the sole administrator in Rivers State and blah, blah. How could a court have issued such an order in the past 48 hours now, and then such order was not made public or was not known? Was not reported by mainstream media, including your own station. Such an order couldn't have been a hidden order, and it only surfaced purportedly yesterday after the administrator made his appointment. So basically, in summary, there is no any such order as I speak now, and it will not be correct to say that the sole administrator has defied any order of any court. He has not done any, to the best of my knowledge.
All right, Dr. Lateef, just to clarify, you said the order, you said that news was published on media that are not mainstream, but I just wanted to clarify that it was reported on the Punch newspaper. Okay, so it's not just which is actually a mainstream.
Was that this morning? Was it this morning or when? Pardon me. When was that reported? Was it this morning or yesterday?
Yesterday. Yesterday
morning.
Yesterday, yes.
Okay, but I can tell you now with authority and sense of responsibility that whoever reported that the Federal High Court made such an order, was either mischievous or deliberately ignorant. because no such order was made. I can share a copy with you. I've seen it. It's published.
Oh, absolutely.
No such
really
order was
that.
made.
Oh, all right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much for that clarification. So, in effect, you are saying no such order was made, and you also support. So then the question now is, as a legal practitioner, do you support the appointments of those local government administrators by the sole administrator?
Okay, let me also start by saying that, you see, our people are, with due respect, or many people are unduly, I would say, apprehensive or being unduly sensational about this River State thing. Yes, like I've said earlier in my, forward, this is an extraordinary situation, which is also an extra legal or extra constitutional situation. So people, I would say rather ridiculously think that the appointment of the sole administrator means paucity of governance in Rivers. Say no, it is not a paucity of governance. Even if he was appointed for just 1 month, governance in Rivers State is not meant to stop for that 1 month. He would do everything that an executive governor of a state would do. That is what it means to be a sole administrator. So basically for me, whether he has made an appointment or he has done anything that the governor of a state will have ordinarily done, it's not an issue that should ordinarily, I would say, cause so much controversies. Because again, governance must continue. They will continue to pay salary in that state. They will continue to run bureaucracy of government. An emergency does not mean putting police or soldier on the road. It means sustenance and continuation of governance. And if you agree with me, if salaries are not paid, if governance is not run smoothly as they should, is that not also a cause for anarchy? Is that not a cause for violence? So basically, an emergency, as I have said, does not mean a paucity of governance. Everything will continue as usual, except for the aspects that have been suspended. That is, the House of Assembly of the state and the governor of the state. So for me, as I've said earlier, the sole administrator has just been doing extraordinary things.
All right.
And
so,
I don't think they should be. Okay.
So you do not see this as a show of power or political move. You don't see it as a show of power.
Well, unfortunately, he is actually the person in power, and he needs to exercise that power, particularly as a sole administrator, meaning that it requires, it's more or less an authority on its own. I mean, it is as bad as that, and I admit. I mean, and this is why the guardians or the gatekeepers of our democratic institutions, the politicians, they should be very careful the way they manage our democracy. This is something that is sour in our mouth, but then the point is that people unfortunately call for this. So this is one of the challenges with emergency. An emergency is an unusual time.
Right.
It's an extraordinary time. That's the unfortunate thing. And that is the reality we are dealing with now. And one of the reasons why we should never hope to have a military administrator again.
All right. Now, 2 questions. One is the fact that, retired Vice Admiral Ibas is in charge right now in sole administrator capacity appointed by the president because of the peculiarity of that state. Does that mean he has absolute power to do the extraordinary, just like you have said, the extras? How is that a lacuna? Does the law preempt that was going to happen? And how far is too far? Because many persons will say that means he can wake up to do other things, and it will be because he has the power. That's number one. What is the place of the National Assembly? Because you understand the National Assembly can oversee him and his whatever he's doing at this time. We understand there has been some concern, especially about the budget. The deputy spokesman for the House of Reps, Philip Agbese, said that the Speaker, Tajuddin Abbas, was consulting with the leadership of the House to set up a committee to monitor the conduct of Ibas. So there are concerns already. Now, that's number one. How absolute is that power? Is there anything, even the president doesn't have absolute powers, so to speak. Number two is this: there have been reactions, and the legal practitioner Taye Oniyide, SAN, argued that the sole administrator's role should have been strictly limited to overseeing the state administration without making significant appointments or changes that go beyond its mandate. And Oniyide emphasized that while the administrator could have focused on administrative duties, like ensuring the payment of salaries, its appointment of new officials of the LGAs and commissions, suggests it may intend to extend the stay beyond the prescribed 6-month period, undermining the state constitutional process. Now, this is one thing that I said. He said his actions are complicating matters and giving the impression that it might remain beyond the interim period. It could become a setback, especially if this appointment conflicts with the authority of the elected governor, Fubara, when he returns. People already started to preempt. Does that mean he's planning to extend his stay? 2 questions.
Well, I think people who say such things, they are just, and with due respect to them, again, being unnecessarily or unduly, I would say, is it apprehensive or maybe complicating things? So, let me say that, one, I do not think the sole administrator has what you call absolute power. No, it doesn't have any. So whatever it does or it fails to do, we still have to examine them within the Part 6, of the provision of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So basically, he is not an authority unto himself. But however, he has extensive powers. And such extensive powers, as I've said earlier, requires that he will take actions that ordinarily the governor of a state will have taken. And the question you want to ask me is this: is there anything he has done so far that a governor of a state would not have taken? To be honest with you, if you want me to answer my question, the answer is I cannot find any, and I've not seen any. Now, regarding the budget, of course, the Constitution...
Dr. Lateef, before you go to the budget, the governor of a state cannot appoint administrators, can they? Especially with the Supreme Court order, the landmark order.
Well, thank you for putting that to me. But the question then is, I remember I used the word extraordinary earlier. Mm-hmm. So those are the extras that possibly a governor may not do because of what the Supreme Court said, in a recent ruling. Mm-hmm. But because we have an administrator in this case, and who is also under an emergency rule, okay, it follows naturally, if you ask me, that he would do certain extra constitutional and extra legal things. Mm. Now, coming back to the budget, the National Assembly, of course, has a legislative powers, pursuant to the provision of the Constitution, to legislate for a state in the absence of the absence of a state assembly of a state. Now, how do they do this? Even a sitting governor or president does not prepare budget by themselves. It is the bureaucracy of government that prepares budget, and the legislature, the House of Assembly or National Assembly, appropriates it into law or pass it into law. Of course, when the budget is prepared, it is prepared in accordance to the vision of a governor or the vision of the president. But the president does not sit down to prepare or pass budget. So in this case too, yes, the sole administrator can engage the bureaucracy of government to prepare budget according to the vision of the emergency period. And such preparation or document will be forwarded to the National Assembly, who will then enact it into law, because you need to spend money. I mean, they can't spend state fund without proper appropriation. And that's one of what led to the emergency in the first place. So basically for me, I think what people have failed to come to terms with is to appreciate that this is an emergency situation. And as I've said earlier, unfortunately so, emergency, extraordinary things will continue to happen as they have happened in the past. I mean, this is not the first time we are witnessing an emergency in Nigeria. We've had it shortly after independence, 61, 62, the Akintola Taku story in the Western region, okay? And then in the Fourth Republic, under Obasanjo, and now again, and even under Jonathan. Of course, they have come in different versions based on the peculiar circumstances of the past. For example, this is the second time we will see the political actors themselves being the source or the reason for an emergency. The first time we saw that was in the Western region, when the then Premier SL Akintola refused to leave. And it led to the popular Yoruba saying that Akintola Taku, he refuses to leave power. And then they had to declare an emergency. I mean, it's a very long story. But in the rivers too, the political actors themselves, they were at the center of the conflict. They were the reason for the emergency, not insecurity per se. But they caused it and then led to insecurity. So for me, really, what I'm saying basically is that people need to come to terms with what an emergency means. There are lacuna, I admit. And one of such lacuna is that the Constitution, for example, has not spelled out in clear terms what a sole administrator can do or cannot do. But there are people who have also argued, and I agree with them, that, well, the Constitution cannot possibly spell out everything. But when you say something is an emergency, you cannot possibly anticipate all emergency situations imaginable. You cannot.
All right, Dr. Lateef. Quite all right. We're having an emergency situation in Rivers State, and like you said, it's an extraordinary situation. My question is this. When the sole administrator was appointed, we were told that he can make decisions, but his decisions are subject to ratification by the National Assembly. As a legal practitioner, let's look at it from this angle. Now the sole administrator is making decisions which are not being ratified by the National Assembly. He has made appointments which did not pass through the National Assembly. Are you not worried that the National Assembly is actually abdicating their role in this case?
Well, I'm actually concerned, just to, align with you to an extent, that this sole administrator might actually sometime, be going out of, I would say, line. But unfortunately, there are no lines here, and that is the problem. I was trying to talk about lacuna. There are no lines here. Ideally, when an emergency proclamation is issued, certain things could have been, specifically stated as to the do and don't and all of those, and even by the National Assembly. But you see, the Constitution itself leaves that open by saying the president may take such action to an extent that, an extraordinary situation might require. And this is what I think everybody is exploiting now.
Yeah, but Dr. Lateef, sorry to cut in, Dr. Lateef. In this case, it's not even going through the National Assembly at all, these appointments. That's my worry. That's my question.
To the best of my understanding, and I need to really confirm this, unless you also want to correct me, all of the appointments that have been made so far. First, let us understand something. An executive can make appointment, I would say, subject to ratification of the legislature, just as the president made the declaration of an emergency. So it is possible that all of these things, if there are those, and I want to emphasize that, if there are those appointments that require the approval of the legislature, in this case, the National Assembly, I would expect that the sole administrator will pass those to them for ratification, if there are those. But to be honest with you, the appointment of the SSG and all other appointments, I'm not aware of any one of them that requires the approval of the Rivers House of Assembly if they were to be in place. And now that they are not in place, the National Assembly steps in. So if there's any such appointment that will require legislative approval, as I've said, well, the sole administrator is also banned, even by the emergency proclamation as approved by the National Assembly, to seek the concurrence of the National Assembly. But that does not mean that it needs to be taking orders from National Assembly. No, that is not what an emergency anticipates. As a sole administrator, he will exercise all the executive powers, plus extra, if you like. All executive power that a governor would typically exercise. All right. Like, for example, issue an executive order and do all of those things. It will do those. It doesn't National Assembly to do all of those.
We are due for a break right now, but so that, we just round off this particular one, do you mean this appointment of his in categorical terms is legal? And number two, the appointment again, are you saying subject to ratification of the National Assembly, or he can appoint them unilaterally now that there is no House of Assembly to ratify, to endorse?
I will need to check. If there are appointments that require legislative approval, yes, it is required to also do that. But if there are appointments, if he has made any that do not require any such ratification, then he can exercise all his executive power. I mean, I would say almost limitless.
Sorry, Dr. Lateef, sorry to cut in. Now we are talking about appointments of local government administrators. This is a huge one here. So don't you think, as a legal practitioner, that this should require ratification of the National Assembly?
Well, I need to also check if the laws of Rivers State requires that such appointment be taken through legislative approval. Yes, if it says, because the laws of Rivers State are also, required to be complied with. So, but I really need to check that. But like I've said earlier, by law, generally speaking, an executive can actually make appointments subsequent to, prior to ratification. So then, or subject to ratification if you like. So it is possible that all of these things will be subsequently ratified by national, if there are any one of them. And I really need to check, to be honest with you. I'm not sure here. But I'm saying the executive power is so broad and very all-encompassing that you can hardly fault any of these things.
All right.
Because governance, as I've said, by an emergency must continue. Does not mean that the government will stop.
For a break right now. The conversation will continue. Please stay with us, Dr. Lateef.
All right, I'm here.
All right, thank you for staying with us. We are talking about the appointment of local government administrators by the sole administrator of Rivers State, Rear Vice Admiral Ibok-Ete Ibas, retired, and that has been generating so much controversies. And in that appointment, he had all the local councils, he has made appointment for them, and you have some of the names to be Mr. Okroyobi Animate, Abua Udua local government area. Good luck. Here Nacho Auhada East, Promise Jacob Auhada West, Tamunotonye Peters, Akuku Toru LGA, Savio Atayi Francis, Anthony Barista, Ibia Poof Charles, Asari Toru, many of them like that, including Mr. Eletuo Ihinacha Oyibo, LGA, Oyibo rather, Sam Kalago, Port Harcourt local government, and Mr. Nuka OS Bikpa, that's for Thai local government area. These are some of the appointments in which he has made, and there have been reactions to that. I take the reaction of another legal practitioner, Salman Jawundo. He criticized the appointment, and he argued that the newly appointed electoral officers are supposed to be screened by the State Assembly, which Ibas cannot do unilaterally. He then pointed out that the sole administrator's actions contradict a Supreme Court ruling that had established the legal framework for the appointment of sole administrators. And let me quote him. He said, if he is acting under the authority of the federal government, he should not overstep his boundaries. That's what Barrister Jawundo SAN said. And he said further, Fubara, as an elected governor, does not need to concern himself with this appointment because they are unconstitutional. And another SAN, Dayo Akinlaja, remarked that under the current circumstances, it is the responsibility of the National Assembly to make laws for Rivers State. And he argued that given the ongoing legal proceedings regarding the suspension of democratic institutions in the state, the sole administrator should be more cautious in making decisions that could be deemed unlawful. And it is only proper for the sole administrator to tread carefully in dealing with the state affairs, especially with the current legal challenges. These are the positions of some legal practitioners, on this matter. We have with us still Dr. Misbah Lateef. You've heard some of these legal minds speak on this matter, and you could see the tone that some of them feel possibly is becoming too powerful, and the unilateral decisions he's making. And you know what they say, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And this is not alleging that he's acting in a corrupt way, but that when you give a man something that appears absolute, even when it's not absolute, there must be limit. And in this particular case, in the two instances of the concerns of these legal minds, what do you think of them? Or is he open-ended? Is it these powers that he has? Let me ask categorically, is it based on logic that the interpretation or in the exercise of that power, he can do this? Oh, if he's deemed it fit, it's fine. If he doesn't deem it fit, it's fine.
You see, this is, I must admit, a very controversial I would say, situation, and no doubt, you have controversies. And just like the opinion you have shared now, yes, some of those opinions, I would say, are correct for me, or admit with them to some limited extent. For example, I would also urge that the sole administrator, exercise caution and then tread softly, as some people have said. But unfortunately, what people actually fail to understand here, and I think I've repeated that, is that this is an emergency situation, which does not necessarily mean a paucity of governance. And to be honest with you, except that if there are appointments that require the approval of the National Assembly, I have not seen anything unusual. Or maybe, sorry, I've not seen anything unconstitutional. There have been many unusual things, because these are not things, we are all used to. But then, these are generally things that an executive governor of a state would do. Make appointment. Now you have someone in place who by law has the power to even do extras. And this is why, like I said earlier, I preface my thought by saying that all the extras that the emergency converts are what we have seen so far. So for me, really, if the appointment that the National Assembly need to approve, well, they should forward them to them for their approval. But it does not need the express direction or daily guidance of National Assembly to do anything. Governance must continue. And governance, as they say, is something that requires day-to-day activities. Are people suggesting that they will be going to National Assembly every day to take order? No, it doesn't even need to take such order from the president. It will take all the executive. You see, the Constitution subsequently, when they reform it, or when may actually want to provide some express provisions, for clarity or better clarity. But as we speak now, the sole administrator has just been taking all the necessary power the Constitution has conferred on him. When Governor Fubara resumes in 6 months or any time, there are those activities that he may also revisit by law. The important thing then will be if he revisits them in accordance to the provisions of the law. For example, if there is any appointment that is not statutorily secured, or if there's any appointment that a governor is allowed, for example, he can resign the contract. If the sole administrator has approved any or awarded any contract, the governor, after resumption, may decide to review those contracts and just revoke them. Of course, subject to whatever inconveniences in terms of breaches that may also bring to the state. So, but if they feel that revoking such contract is appropriate, so the sole administrator is there for a temporary time. Whatever he has done, rightly or wrongly, can subsequently be revisited, or even presently, people can still go to court. This is why the judiciary has not, in these circumstances, I would say, been removed from the picture of things. People can approach the court, they can seek the redress, they can do all of those things. And this is not to say that the sole administrator should ordinarily govern with impunity. But unfortunately, I do not align with people who think some of these things are unconstitutional or they are illegal. I've not seen any, to be honest with you.
All right.
People don't understand the implication of emergency. Emergency requires all of this. This is why people should guard our democracy jealously and avoid this unfortunate situation in the first place. That is the best way to attend to this.
All right, Dr. Lateef. All right. For the sake of our esteemed viewers, going back to the question I raised, my first question, talking about the legality of this appointment, when you claimed that it was not reported in mainstream media. For the sake of our esteemed viewers, I would like to clarify that it was actually reported in the mainstream media, not just the Punch newspaper. I'll be pulling up another report now from the Vanguard newspaper, April 8, 2025, which says, court stops Rivers sole administrator from appointing LGA administrators. And this report says, a federal high court sitting in Port Harcourt has restrained the sole administrator of Rivers State, Vice Admiral Ibok-Ete Ibas retired, from appointing sole administrators or their equivalents to oversee the 23 local government areas in Rivers State. Justice Adamu Suraki Mohammed granted the order in suit number FHC/PH/CS/46/2025 filed by the PLEX Center for Civic Education Initiative led by Courage Mirimovo against the sole administrator in its official capacity. Going forward with that report, it says the court has noted that the motion ex parte filed on March 28, 2025 sought several reliefs, including an interim injunction restraining the respondent and his agents from making such appointments. The applicants also requested any further orders the court deemed necessary. Justice Mohammed, after reviewing the motion, ruled in favor of the applicant and fixed April 14, 2025 for the hearing of the substantive matter. That's just an excerpt from that report. So it was actually reported.
Can I quickly speak to that? I want to thank you for bringing out all of those. But you see, I think the focus now should rather be on the veracity of what was reported and not really on whether a mainstream or no mainstream reported something. I appreciate that you have pointed that out, and I understand what you are saying. But the point is that, and I'm telling with all sense of responsibility and authority, those reports that you just read out, they are irresponsible lies. And I say this because, again, as I speak to you now, I have the enrolled order with me. No such order was made. It was an irresponsible fake news, irresponsible lies, reported by irresponsible people. And I'm not sorry to say that, because this is how people also, in a way, create crisis in the society. There is no any such order. So let us not focus on who reported what. Let us focus on the veracity. The Federal High Court in River did not make any such order. It is irresponsible lies.
So you claim you have the certified, sorry to cut in, Dr. Latif. You're claiming you have the CTC, the certified true copy of that judgment, of that ruling.
Certified true copy. You have a copy with you there?
No, you said you have a copy of the judgment. I just want to clarify.
I do, and I can share with you if you want me to. I hope I can share my screen now.
Oh, we'd really appreciate that.
If I know, I will share after this. I will say after this show, I'm going to share. I'm going to forward the copy to your line. I'm going to do that. Right. I have a certified true copy. What the court said, for emphasis again, and for the benefit of viewer, is that in the circumstances, I'm almost quoting the judge now. In the circumstances, I think it is reasonable and the right thing to put the other parties on notice. So a reporter's reeling out the prayers before the court does not amount to an order made by the court. The court said it is hereby ordered that the respondent be put on notice. That is not an order restraining the sole administrator. So it's not for me again now on who reported what. It is the veracity of what was, and I'm saying it, putting my own integrity on the line, and with all sense of responsibility that that report, as you read out, is quite irresponsible because it is not correct and it is inaccurate.
All right. Thank you for that clarification. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you for that clarification.
All right. Let's now look. Doctor, are you with us?
I'm with you. I'm listening, actually.
Let's look at, you know, apart from law, of course, everything has to be through the prism of the law. This so-called tension, and that some have thought, you know, that the appointment of the sole administrator in the first place was more like the president ruling by proxy. You know, and some have expressed that, by the way, to say he doesn't even have that power to do that in the first place. You know, the conversation have been forwarded to say the president can unilaterally, in as much possible there are issues in any state, to say, you know, there should be state of emergency in this state. And some of the grounds that are given by the law, this is just like taking it back, have they been established in the first place? To say state of emergency is rife. The call for it is rife in River State. Okay, a couple of pipeline vandalism and all of those things, which we learned, maybe one or two of them have started working again to say this is just, maybe it was preemptive, maybe it was too hasty a decision. Now there are some states in which killings have been happening. In fact, yesterday, where it was widely reported that the Shehu of Bono is, you know, talked about how things are getting terrible in Borno State. The governor, Babangida Zulum, the professor, admitted and told the military, things are getting out of hand. Killings on the plateau, killings in Benue, these are killings that keeps happening every day. State of emergency have not been applied in those states. In fact, the conversation is not up. And Rivers State, that, hardly, we can't say because the numbers are not high in the order of casualties, so it doesn't matter. Every lives matter. But you don't have such preponderance of killing in Rivers. And state of emergency was declared in that state. How about those states that killings are happening every day? The traditional rulers admitted, the governors have admitted, things are getting terrible. No talk of state of emergency, which made some people to say, the moment the president has interest in your state and there are issues, he can just slam a state of emergency, call on that. But what do you say to that? People with that narrative that are not even politicians at all.
All right, thank you. First and foremost, I think the issue of the powers of the president to issue an emergency, is neither here nor there. And more so, the issue is already before the Supreme Court as we speak now. 11 governors, as you are aware, have gone to the Supreme Court to challenge the powers of the president and the extent of the exercise of that power. So because of the, the issue about sub judice, I might not want to go into so much about that. But it is enough to say that I don't think that is really an issue for now. The president has done what is empowered according to Constitution to do. The National Assembly has approved it. Let us await what the Supreme Court will say on that. Now, having said that, I think people are, again, and unfortunately, because I really disagree with them, they are confusing things. And I think some people are doing this deliberately, mischievously.
How?
Now, the situation in Yobe or in Borno or wherever Bauchi, they are quite unfortunate. We know the situation of insecurity in Nigeria. This did not start now. But then those places are in a way quasi-theater of wars. There are heavy military presence everywhere. We know that the military is up to task in those states, and more so, the political actors are not the basis for insecurity in those states. So people are failing to draw this distinction. Every emergency we have had in the past, from 1962, they have come in different shape, in different circumstances. And I've said that earlier. In Rivers State, there was a deadlock. The executive was not working with the legislature. And there was a palpable, tense, insecure situation of things in Rivers State, to the extent of the bombing that you talk about. But even beyond that, Supreme Court in their own judgment said there was no governance in Rivers State, that the governor was ruling with autocracy or something like that. So basically for me, the circumstances leading to emergency in Rivers State do not exist in Borno. The governor of Borno State is not the one at the center of conflict. It's not the one at the center of crisis.
Dr. Lateef, sorry to butt in, sir. What I'm saying is this, part of what you have said, the circumstance that we lead for a call, the grants are given in the Constitution, granted, but must it be politically inclined? Must it be politically motivated? Some of those grants talk about if there is total breakdown of law and order, if there are issues, and the whole place is in disarray. And is it only the ones that have political inclinations?
It didn't say there is total breakdown. It says it lists, there are circumstances, and one of them is likelihood. Don't forget that. So it doesn't really have to have happened. If there is likelihood of crisis, occurring or breaking out, the president can act. This is what the Constitution says. These are not my own words. So it doesn't have to have
nothing has happened in Rivers State. Nothing really.
Well, I don't think so. I saw a stalemate. I saw a governor who was clearly spending state resources without allocation. I see a House of Assembly that was not willing to accept or receiving budget from the governor. I saw a stalemate. So this is what happened in Rivers State. I admit and appreciate people who do not see it in that light, who disagree, fine, but I don't see it in that light with them. And I think people have actually gone beyond whether the emergency was justified or not. Some people thought it was hasty, it was excessive, or blah, blah, and all of those. But I've not really seen many people say that there was no crisis in Rivers State. There was crisis in Rivers State. There was a stalemate. There was total absence of governance. the governor was ruling like an autocrat. He was not working with the House of Assembly. They were also not working with him. So the political actors in Rivers State across divide, they created the crisis in Rivers State. And this is what we should make them understand. You see, if we continue to deflect on their behalf and by passing the buck or making the excuses, then we probably not, I mean, we don't want this crisis to come to an end. That is the implication. So for me, really, the emergency in Rivers State is justified. And as I've said earlier, the case is already before the Supreme Court as we speak now. And as a lawyer, I'm not really allowed, so much room to discuss an issue that has already been submitted to particularly to the highest court in the land. So let us see what the Supreme Court will say on that.
All right, Dr. Lateef. You happen to be one of the very few people I've come across who actually support the state of emergency in Rivers. Very few. In fact,
I admit that we are not in the majority.
You are the first one I'm speaking with who actually supports the state of emergency in Rivers.
I admit that we are not in the majority. I admit that, but it doesn't, sometimes, I mean, the majority doesn't, being in the majority does not necessarily mean one is right or wrong.
Absolutely. That brings me to my question. That brings me to my question, Dr. Lateef. Now, away from the legal aspects of it, coming back to the appointments made by the sole administrator of Rivers State, appointing 23 administrators for the 23 local government areas of Rivers State. In your opinion, Dr. Lateef, what are the political implications of these appointments? How do you see it affecting the polity in Rivers State?
Well, for me, really, it is a clarion call to political leaders in Rivers State, across divides, to appreciate, I would say, the value of our democracy and the danger that may assail our democratic governance if they choose to behave or act irresponsibly, as we have seen many of them did, across divides. I'm not saying the blame is in a particular. So for me, really, the political implication is that going forward, I expect the political actors in Rivers State to take a huge lessons from this. And of course, political actors across other states in Nigeria to understand the slippery slope, if you ask me, they are passing or they are exposed to if they do not conduct themselves responsibly well. So because the president of the country has a constitutional power to ensure security of life and property across the state in Nigeria. That is what our constitution says. So politically, they have a lesson to learn from this. And as I've said earlier, I expect that Governor Fubara will come back in 6 months' time, hopefully, if the emergency is not extended. And I do not think there is any basis for extension. I cannot see any for now, and I do not anticipate any. But regardless, the Constitution actually provides that it could be extended. So when it comes back to power, it can also review some of these things. Government or governors sometimes award contracts that will last for 20 or 10 years when they barely have 4 years in office. So this is governance. Governance is a continuous, as the popular saying goes. So that someone is in office for 3 or 2 months does not mean that they will not do whatever is required for them to do by law. So for me, really, I do not think the sole administrator has exceeded his authority so far. He may do so tomorrow, and if I see one, I will point it out. But I've not seen any.
All right, Dr. Lateef, very quickly, just to make allusion to what we talked about earlier, talking about Borno State now. In your own opinion, in the case of Borno State, the governor of the state has actually cried out that he is losing grounds to terrorists. Don't you think, in your opinion, as a legal practitioner, that this is good ground for the president of Nigeria to declare a state of emergency in that state?
Well, if the governor is helpless and he has cried out and he has requested for help, yes. The president is by law empowered to also declare a state of emergency. Now, that state of emergency may come in the Jonathan version, if you ask me. And I say this because the governor of Borno State is not the reason for crisis in Borno State. The governor is not the reason for conflict, for killing up and down. The governor is just overwhelmed. And the president has superior power to curtail it. So if they need emergency to address those situations better, why not? And I will not expect that the governor will be removing that circumstance. You see, again, this brings me back to the point that an emergency, even under the Constitution, leaves room for the president to use circumstances to determine what an emergency will entail in different situations. And that is the reality. So one emergency may not look exactly like another one, because each emergency will be tackled based on the circumstances that warranted them in the first place. And this is why, again, it will be very difficult for National Assembly to specify, possibly imaginable emergency situations. So they may not even be able to reform that provision of the Constitution, because they have to leave it at large. Because emergency, as I've said earlier, you cannot possibly anticipate all emergency imaginable. It is not possible. So that provision or clause, I can bet with you, will always be there. That when an emergency is declared, extraordinary measure or circumstances may warrant that extraordinary. So for me, really, yes. If there's an emergency in Borno State, just to cut this short, yes, it could be declared. It could be declared in anywhere there is an emergency. Do you know emergency flooding could also be a basis for emergency?
Absolutely. Natural
if
disaster.
a state is flooded, pardon?
I said that's a natural disaster. Absolutely.
Thank you. Natural disaster. So if there is natural disaster that has overwhelmed a state, for example, would I expect the president to remove the governor or the House of Assembly for that? My answer would be no. But the president may declare an emergency in that state to the extent of whatever necessary measures to curtail the natural disaster. But if the governor is the cause of the natural disaster or the House of Assembly, well, they may also be removed. So an emergency is an emergency.
So technically, Dr. Lateef, sorry to cut in, technically you're saying that the governor of Rivers State is the cause of that disaster there, so to speak.
Absolutely. The governor of Rivers State, the House of Assembly, the political actor, yes. And this is the distinction I've been trying to make. They are at the heart of the crisis in Rivers State, and that was why they had to go. They could not be part of the solution at this time. They were the problem. They were the crisis. So you have to remove them to address the problem. You cannot use the same method that created the problem to resolve the problem. It's not possible. This is logic. So the governor was the cause. The House of Assembly was the cause. Their godfather in Abuja or wherever, all of them put together, they were the reason for this emergency in Rivers State. So they cannot be, okay, how do you leave the governor to continue to exercise his executive powers? And you claim you have an emergency. Emergency to do what? The governor who has been spending without appropriation, the governor who has seized the fund of the House of Assembly for over 15 months, the governor who has, it is not possible. So where the governor are not the crisis, where the House of Assembly is not the reason, I do not expect an emergency that will remove them from their offices. And this is exactly why I think President Goodluck Jonathan did not remove the governors in Borno and one other state at that time. The governors were not responsible for the crisis. In fact, it was a failure of the federal government. If you have insecurity in Borno that is so large, it's also the failure of the federal government. The federal government has the superpower of the armed forces of Nigeria. So if a governor is overwhelmed, then it comes back to the president. It is the failure of the president or the federal government.
All right.
So in that case, how do you then remove a governor for what you have failed to do? You cannot. But if the governor is a problem, they should go. If the House of Assembly is a problem, they will naturally go. It is logic.
All right. Exactly. That's where I'm starting from. Is that logic or law?
It is both. Logic is a component of legal reasoning. And also naturally so, I would say.
All right.
Yes, logic and law, they have their alignment.
All right.
In some areas.
We have to go on another break right now, but I have a question. That's where we'll be starting with when we come back. And it is to say that those that feel this appointment, the decisions being taken by, especially with the latest decision of the administrators being appointed for local councils, possibly is not looking like the man is just coming for stability. You can do other things and, run the business. There are civil servants at the state, at the local councils and all of those things. What do you say to those that think there is more than meets the eye? Maybe retired Admiral Ibas wants to spend more time than he already has. But all of those things will be done after this break. Please stay with us.
All right.
Thank you for staying with us. And this is the home stretch as far as this conversation is concerned. You know, I was asking our guest, Dr. Misbah Lateef, a law lecturer and a legal practitioner, and of course an analyst, that there are concerns that the steps being taken by retired Vice Admiral Ibas, it seems it's not looking like it's just for stability. Firstly, it relieved all the appointees of government, you know, all their duties. Some are saying it's unnecessary, really. Okay, he has made some appointments again, and the latest is the administration, the appointment of local government administrators in all of these states. And he has less than 6 months, so to say, at least from today. What will you say to those that are thinking that way, that are all those things necessary? You can stabilize a state without going through other route that is too unilateral and, of course, too all-encompassing. Are all those things necessary? If it's just for 6 months, if he's not interested beyond in extending his tenure, if you have come for stability, why take all these decisions like you want to be there, like a person having a 4-year tenure?
Okay, let me start by saying first, those people are entitled to their opinion, right, and I do respect and appreciate their opinion. But of course, I do not agree with some of them, and for the reasons, some of the reasons I've stated earlier. Yeah. And I will start by taking it to Rivers. When Celestine Omehia was governor of Rivers for less than 1 or 2 months or thereabout, he made appointments until the Supreme Court removed him and put Rotimi Amechi into the same Rivers. So the point is this, and I've said this before, the state administrator, the sole administrator, is required to govern. So if there are things in his own wisdom, unfortunately, in his sole unilateral wisdom or judgment, if there are machineries of government, he will require to deliver on his task. There are no limits to him or for him to do so under the emergency proclamation. So people who are needlessly speculating on whether he will spend 6 months or whatever, we all know that his tenure is initially 6 months. And if this will be extended, it will depend on the National Assembly. So I do not really want to join, I would say, those needless speculations. I think what we should focus on now is that, one, does he have the power to be in where he is? Well, as far as we know for now, he has the power to be the sole administrator. As a sole administrator, is he in Rivers State to govern or just to be there as a lame dog, providing security and doing nothing, or maybe just paying salary? No. 6 months is long enough in the life of a state to make, I would say, significant positive and negative changes. Now, whether the changes he's making or he has made are positive or negative, let us leave that in the womb of time. So if it's 6 months, for example, we rebuild the state of assembly that was demolished by the governor, why not so? If it's 6 months can give them 10 kilometers of roads, that in addition to whatever was done there before, why not so? If the 6 months will take Rivers State forward by him doing something or the other, why not so? So the point is that the sole administrator is not gagged by any provisions of the proclamation issued by the president or the ratification issued by the National Assembly. So to that extent, he is in that state to govern and is entitled to do whatever is necessary in his own judgment, in his own wisdom, to govern the state. This is why he is called sole administrator. He is not called the governor of the state. He is a sole administrator. And by that, the implication of emergency one, the implication of being a sole administrator is such that he will do a lot of unilateral things. Again, I started by saying he will be doing extraordinary things. And this is exactly what we are saying. So people should come to terms with this. And if there are constitutional infractions, of course, the judiciary is there. People can always challenge those. And I've said earlier that whatever decision he has made now, if they have affected the state negatively or positively, that is in the womb of time. We can judge him. But for now, I do not think all of these controversies are exactly necessary. Let us allow him to spend the 6 months. and do whatever he can do within those 6 months. Once it's gone, there will be a new government, whoever it may be, and I expect that should be the governor coming back to his office. Okay, they can review all of those things. I mean, to the extent that the Constitution also permits them to do so. For example, now if he has appointed somebody, the River State Electoral Commission or whoever, that is a position that is constitutionally, I would say, secured. I mean, a tenure position for a certain period of time. If he comes back, if you want to remove him, you can approach the House of Assembly of the state, I don't know, whatever it is. So the point is that...
Before my colleague comes in, that's one of the issues as well, that institution like that, the RCEC, what if you're not planning to conduct local government election, the previous one has been null and void by the Supreme Court verdict and all of those things. If you're not planning to conduct local government election, why change the leadership? And if actually you are planning to conduct that, what for?
Okay, let me quickly say this. By law, and I also imagine this, and I would actually love this to happen, so that Nigeria can learn from this. By law, if he has successfully appointed people into River State Electoral Commission or whatever, then he may actually be planning to conduct an election. The question is that, can he do so? The answer is yes. And if he chooses to conduct the election, I imagine that the election will probably be freer than what we have seen the governors in Nigeria conducted. What the governors all over Nigeria do is to simply put their puppies, to puppet rather, yes, and puppies too, in government. They don't conduct what you can call a local government election. They just simply declare their own party men. And this cut across all the parties, APC, PDP, LP, and all of them. Now, if we have somebody who is supposedly neutral, a sole administrator who can give us a template in River State, so be it. I actually imagine that he would do so, and I really want him to do so. So that if somebody like him conduct a local government election in River State, it is possible that we'll see multiple political parties, all of them picking one local government or the other, rather than the fraudulent system we are used to, where governors simply return their own puppet into office. So yes, he's empowered to conduct election within 6 months. And if he can do so, so be it.
All right, Dr. Lateef. So far, Dr. Lateef, democracy is supposed to be government of the people, for the people, by the people. In all this drama in River State, we've been talking about the governor, the suspended governor, Governor Siminalayi Fubara. We've been talking about the FCT minister, Nyesom Wike. We've been talking about the sole administrator, Vice Admiral Ibok-Ete Ibas, retired. So far, Dr. Lateef, no one is talking about the people. So the question is, as a Nigerian, where does that leave the people of River State? How do you think this will affect public trust in River State? Because no one is talking about the people of River State.
Unfortunately, I agree with you. And that is one of the downside, of this political imbroglio in River State, if you ask me. But talking about the people, I think the political elite, leading to this conflict, they have failed the people. Now, the people now have another opportunity with a sole administrator. I've not seen street protests in River State. I've not seen people, of course, there are people who do not agree with the emergency thing and all of that, but I've not really seen any substantial or significant protests again. So,
Dr. Lateef, sorry to cut in. Don't you think that's because the people now feel their voices don't count anymore?
Well, unfortunately, if that is the case, there is little anything anybody can do about it. So the best we can do at the moment, therefore, in the circumstances, being realistic, is to allow the sole administrator to make his governance, and we see how this affects the people. So if he is able to give people, something better than what the politicians have given them, so be it. So my own point basically is this: the politicians across the parties in this political circumstance, they have failed the people. So if they have failed the people, and then we have an alternative government, in place, let us assess that alternative government on the basis of how much of governance is doing to benefit the people. So if there are things it's doing that are not beneficial to the people of River State, okay, fine, we can point those out. I understand how this affect our democracy psyche. I mean, how people feel like, oh, we wanted a democracy and then this is what we have got. But of course, that is the reality they've got now. So people have to make do with that reality in the meantime. And as I've said earlier, it is possible that something better will actually come out of Rivers State. And I really want to repeat this. I expect him to conduct local government election. And I expect that election to be free and fair compared to what we have seen. In all of us, one of the problems we have in Nigeria is that we all continue to deceive ourselves. People pretend as if they don't know what the governors in Nigeria do with local government election. We saw the one in Osun recently. I mean, a sham that was called a local government election. We've seen it in other states, not only Osun. So the question then is, why do we pretend as if the governors themselves are not undermining our democracy? So for me, personally speaking for myself, if I see a sole administrator, a quasi-military government, who can give us a free and fair and credible local government election in Rivers State and possibly set a national template, so be it. So I expect that if election is conducted at all by this sole administrator, I expect it to be free, fair, and credible. And I expect multiple political parties to win different local government based on their strength. I don't want to see a one party win everything. So if that happens, would that not be more beneficial to the people? One of the reasons why we fail in Nigeria, I mean, in governance, is because the governors, all of them, almost all of them, they have crumbled our local government administration because of their, I would say, I mean, they rely on local government resources. So they don't want divergent political parties in local government so that they can continue to control the resources of local government and our people continue to suffer. So for me, really, in these 6 months, and he has barely spent one or thereabout month, I expect the people to be the greatest beneficiary of the emergency. And if that does not happen, then we will have also failed the people again. I mean, if the politicians have failed them, unfortunately, the administrator will have also failed them.
All right. You know, in your submission right now, you made mention in passing the local government election that held February 22 in Osun State. You are from here. Possibly you can spend a minute or two on that before we go. You called it a sham. One would say, why was it a sham? They gave a notice of almost a year, and they went on to do that. And on February 22nd, you know, they had that election with, you know, challenges, by the way. But why did you think it was a sham?
Okay, let me say that. First, I'm also from Osun State, and I'm proud to say I'm from Orolu local government, Ifon Osun to be precise, right. So you know that, I guess. Now, I'm also a stakeholder in Osun State, and a significant stakeholder with all modesty. That election was a sham, not because notice was given or was not given, but because of the way it was conducted.
How?
No election truly in the real sense held. And I'll give just one example, and I challenge you as a journalist to contradict it. No results. No result, no figure was ever reeled out when they released the purported. I mean, what kind of election is that? I mean, let us imagine that INEC does anything to that, I mean, like that to us nationally. You can imagine the outrage. No election results were released. No figures were announced. No numbers were attached to any names. They just reel out names, and they said one particular party, the ruling party, won everything. Of course, as other governors do in other states. That is what made it a sham. And I'm not really sorry to say that. It was a fraudulent election and a complete sham.
The fact that figures were not returned, that component alone, does it, you know, rubbish the entire process?
In fact, that is the essence of an election. You must return numbers. Who won what? Who scored what? No opposition. I mean, we didn't get any number. Not even single number. No tally, no nothing. You see, the credibility of election and election at any level is measured by the processes. Okay? For example, ballot counting, ballot sorting, result announcement, and all of those things. None of such was done. They merely read out names. And even to the name they read out, they didn't attach number to them. I mean, I could have expected, for example, they would say, okay, Mr. ABC won Orolu local government with 23,000 votes. None of such was done. That was what made it a sham. It was a fraud. A fraud on the state of Osun State. A sham.
Right. And I think my last question for you on this program, you are a critical stakeholder, just like any Ocean person, and of course you have worked here, you are abreast of the information at home. There were issues with the local government administration. Still there is issues, right? I mean, there is an issue right now. There is stalemate at the local councils. And of course, there was a communal issue where you come from and some other communities as well. There have been calls by the All Progressives Congress, some members of the All Progressives Congress in Osun State, and especially the National Secretary of that party, Ajibola Bashiru, that the state of emergency is ripe in Osun State. In fact, he said, let it be slammed on the state. Do you agree with this position? Do we have the ground for
unfortunately, that? I mean, the way I see things, with all modesty and honesty, I do not think we have a situation that warrant a state of emergency in Osun as we speak now. Seriously, there is none. Not even the unfortunate crisis in my own community. You see, my community of Ifon, Ilobuerin, I grew up in that community. Right. We are brothers, we are sisters. Okay, what we see now, I don't know, it's quite unfortunate and something that actually personally saddens me. Right. I have cousins in these other communities. I have relatives. We are brothers. And then we see this. So I'm saying, even notwithstanding this particular crisis in my own community, okay, and also the stalemate in local governments across Osun, and I would say a stalemate engineered by politicians who irresponsibly, again, and I'm very fond of that word, permit me, who irresponsibly have instigated ordinary civil servant, the local government employee, to stay away from work, okay?
All right.
All of this notwithstanding, I do not think a state of emergency is justified in Osun at this time.
Right, no,
and I hope such a circumstance will not, happen. I do not see any.
Thank you very much. A law lecturer, a legal practitioner, a law lecturer with the University of Hull in the UK, a stakeholder here, and of course a legal practitioner, Dr. Misbah Lateef. Thank you for your time on this program again today.
Thank you, my pleasure, and thank also for the good job your studio is doing.
Thank you very much. And these are the issues. We will stay on this matter.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for staying with us on Morning Spring on Western Spring Television. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Absolutely.
Such an insightful conversation with Dr. Lateef right there. And that's exactly what we do here on Morning Spring on Western Spring Television. Please join us again tomorrow for a fresh edition of Morning Spring on Western Spring Television. Don't forget, you can check out this conversation on YouTube, on our social media handles on Western Spring Television. Do enjoy the rest of the day. Emeka Daniel is my name. Good morning.
And of course, Femi Ojo is my name. We want to thank the production team for working with us today again. God bless Osun State. God bless Rivers State. God bless all the states in Nigeria. God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.